Family dinners weren't mandatory, but in our house, skipping one was treated like treason. I hadn't missed a single Sunday meal since I was 17, not because I craved the company, but because I knew exactly what they'd say if I didn't show up. Too busy to see your family, huh? Or, oh, Adam thinks he's better than us now. Spoiler, I didn't think I was better. I just didn't think they noticed me at all. The dining room still looked like it hadn't evolved since the 90s. Glass fruit bowl centerpiece, plastic protectors under the chairs, and a chandelier that rattled every time the HVAC kicked in. Eric, my older brother by 2 years and family favorite by a landslide, sat at the head of the table like it was his birthright. His wife Jessica was absent, again, which meant the only other adults were our parents, who still treated him like he was 6 and just won a spelling bee. And me? Still seated next to the kitchen doorway. The swing seat, Mom called it. In other words, the chair nobody ever fought for. So, Eric said, swirling his wine like he understood tannins. Still riding solo, Adam? I looked up from my plate. He didn't wait for a reply. He never did. No wife, no kids, no life? He said with a smirk so wide it could have been copyrighted. Dad chuckled, not a belly laugh, more of a "he's got a point" grunt. Mom sipped her wine and muttered something about career-obsessed men. I cut into the chicken. It was dry. Not surprising. I stayed quiet. Because honestly, what could I say that would register with people who still thought success meant Christmas card photos and a golden retriever named Buster? Truth was, I had a good life. A quiet condo on the other side of town. A job in operations management with enough income to live well, save better, and help some people who never even noticed. No debt. No kids. No chaos. Just calm. But in this house? That meant nothing. Eric had 2 kids, a high-maintenance SUV he couldn't afford, and a LinkedIn profile that still said business consultant, though nobody could quite explain what he consulted. And yet, he was the golden boy. I could have built a rocket and landed it in their backyard. They'd still ask Eric to fix the Wi-Fi. Have you ever thought? He continued, pouring himself more wine. Maybe you're alone because you never took risks? I blinked. Risks? Like the time Mom and Dad used my college fund to cover his startup idea? The one that crashed in 6 months? Or when I took on 2 jobs just to stay in school while he couch-surfed across Europe, finding himself? Nah, I'd taken risks. Just not the kind that get toasted over dry chicken and passive-aggressive salads. You always did play it safe, Dad added, carving his turkey like a judge passing a sentence. Safe. That word clanged in my chest like a rusty bell. Safe meant invisible in this family. Safe meant useful when needed, quiet the rest of the time. It wasn't just this dinner. It was the accumulation of years. Of missed birthdays. Of gifts returned unopened. Of jokes where I was the punchline, not the guest of honor. And yet I showed up. Week after week. Why? Habit? Guilt? Hope? I glanced at Eric. He looked smug. Confident. Like he believed every word he said, because nobody had ever made him doubt it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift. Not rage. Not revenge. Just readiness. I cut another piece of chicken and let the silence ride for a few seconds too long. The kind of silence that made even confident men refill their glass. Everything all right? Mom asked, peering over her wine glass. I nodded. Just thinking. And for once, I meant it. I wasn't the kind of guy who raised his voice. In this house, raising your voice just meant giving them more ammo. It meant getting told you were too sensitive, or dramatic, or worse, just jealous. So I let things simmer. Not in anger, but in strategy. You know, Eric said, spearing a potato like it owed him money. Jessica's been thinking of starting her own Etsy shop. Jewelry or candles or something. Mom perked up. Oh, that's such a great idea. She's always been so crafty. I nodded. Yeah. That'd be cool. Eric turned to me. Think you could help her set up a business plan? I mean, you're good with that boring spreadsheet stuff, right? Ah, there it was. Not a real question. A casual assumption that I'd drop everything to be their free consultant. Again. Last time, I spent 3 weekends helping him build out a pitch deck for some fitness app he never launched. Before that, I ghostwrote half his resume. The job he still claims fell through because the company wasn't ready for innovation. Still, I smiled. Sure. If she's serious, she can email me. Eric raised an eyebrow. Email? You sound like a customer service rep. I mean, she can schedule a time. Like anyone else. That earned a laugh from him. Wow. You really are married to your calendar, huh? Dad joined in. He's always been that way. Adam's idea of fun is budgeting. Mom giggled. Maybe that's why he's still single. I don't know if they realized how often they made me the joke. I think, in their minds, it was affection. That twisted, backhanded family kind. Except affection doesn't feel like being shoved into a corner and told to smile. They never asked how I was doing. Not really. Not after the time I pulled 16-hour days during the pandemic to keep warehouse logistics from collapsing. Not when I bought my first condo at 29. Not even when I got promoted last year and became regional lead for our entire district. What they did ask was whether I could fix Eric's taxes. I did. Review their refinance paperwork. I did. Co-sign Eric's car lease. I didn't. They didn't talk about that last one much. Especially not after Eric forgot to make 3 payments in a row. I covered it quietly. Paid it off. Just to save my own credit. I didn't say a word. Why? Because silence is how you survive in a family where speaking up is mistaken for selfishness. Eric leaned back in his chair, rubbing his stomach like he'd just eaten success itself. So, still doing that operations gig, huh? Still, I said. Must be nice to not have to worry about feeding a family. All that disposable income. I tilted my head. You mean like the kind that disappears on 3 streaming services, unpaid insurance, and that crypto scheme you pitched to Dad? He blinked. The table stilled. Mom gave a tight laugh. Boys, please, let's keep it light. Eric chuckled like it didn't bother him. But his fork tapped just a bit louder now. You don't get it, he said. Family's not about money. It's about being there. Showing up. I stared at him for a beat too long. The irony practically strangled the air. Because when I think of showing up, I think of me driving Mom to her outpatient surgery when Eric had plans. Me covering Dad's emergency dental when insurance lapsed. Me picking up Eric's kids from school twice last month when Jessica forgot. But sure. Let's pretend I've been absent. I folded my napkin onto my plate. Calm. Measured. I'm here now, I said. Eric scoffed. Yeah. But are you really? And for a second, I almost said it. Almost let the line fly. The one that had been quietly forming in my chest for weeks. The one that would flip the whole room inside out. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I reached for my water. Cool. Steady. Let it hang. Let them talk a little longer. Let them dig. They were so confident in their hierarchy, so sure of who carried the crown and who carried the dishes. They didn't know the only reason the lights were still on in Eric's house was sitting across from him. And I was done being quiet. Just not tonight. After dinner, the clatter of dishes echoed through the house like background noise to a show I wasn't watching. Eric was already sprawled on the couch like he just clocked out from a 12-hour shift, not 2 hours of sitting, eating, and talking about himself. I was back in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands in the sink, like always. My parents didn't ask, they just expected. Adam, grab the dessert plates? Mom called without even turning. Sure, I said, stacking them one by one. I had a dishwasher at my place. Here? I was the dishwasher. I felt Dad's presence before I saw him. He leaned against the doorway, wine glass still in hand. So what's the plan, son? He asked. With what? I said, not looking up. Your life. I paused for half a second. That's a big question after mashed potatoes. He chuckled. You know what I mean. You're not getting any younger. No kids, no house, no plan. You're stable, sure, but what are you building? I rinsed a fork and let the water run. I could have told him I was building peace. That I had savings, investments, and a quiet little life that didn't require anyone's applause. But I knew what he meant. Where's the white picket fence? The smiling kids? The dog named Buster? I'm doing fine, I said. He nodded like that word disappointed him. Well, your brother's under a lot of pressure, you know. You might not understand what it's like to have to provide. I stopped rinsing. The irony nearly choked me. Because I was providing. Just not in the way he knew. I'd been covering Eric's mortgage for 8 months, ever since the bank called me, out of nowhere, because Eric had listed me as his emergency contact. Payments missed. Account defaulted. His credit score was so low it needed a ladder. And instead of owning up, Eric just kept pretending. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't expose him. I just fixed it. For the kids. For my own sanity. I walked back out as Mom set down the dessert tray, store-bought cookies, surprisingly decent. Eric sat up straighter. Jess and I are thinking of upgrading. Oak Ridge maybe. Better schools, more space. That's wonderful. Mom beamed. Eric nodded, serious. We just need a little help with the down payment. I didn't react. He kept going. Thought maybe we could all pitch in. Like a family investment. Dad nodded without blinking. Makes sense. Then they all looked at me. Like it was obvious. Eric leaned in. You could front it. Just until I lock in my next contract. That mythical contract. The one that had been in talks for 2 years. How much are we talking? I asked. He shrugged. 40 grand? My laugh almost escaped. Not because of the number, but because he said it like he was asking to borrow a hoodie. You've got no kids, no mortgage. He added casually. I blinked slowly. No mortgage? The man who's been living off my quiet bank transfers thought I was coasting. The room waited for my answer like it was already a yes. They weren't asking. They were assuming. I stood up, brushing crumbs off my jeans. Where are you going? Mom asked. Early morning, I said. I've got meetings. Eric smirked. Still married to your calendar? I looked at him, and smiled. Better than being married to a fantasy. His smile faltered, just a hair. Tell Jess to email me, I added, reaching for my coat. We'll talk candles, once the heat's off. Then I left. Not a scene. Not a shout. Just a quiet crack in their little reality. But it was enough. The fuse was lit. The next morning, I got up at 6:15. Not because I had to, my first meeting was at 9, but because I liked having time before the world started asking for things. My condo was quiet. My coffee was strong. And for once, my to-do list didn't include fixing someone else's mess. Until my phone buzzed. Eric. 6:37 a.m. I didn't pick up. He called again at 7:10. Then again at 8. I finally checked the voicemail while making breakfast. Hey man, not sure what's going on, but I just got a weird alert from the bank, something about a bounce payment. I thought we had that all set up. Can you check if maybe something glitched on your end? My end. The man didn't even ask why I was paying it. He just assumed I'd screwed up. Like this was a shared project, not a one-man rescue mission. I pulled up my banking app. Scrolled through the payment history. 8 straight months. On time. Every time. $2,173.49. That's what I'd been auto-transferring to cover his mortgage. The mortgage he let slide without telling Jessica or my parents. The mortgage that, if left unpaid, would have left his kids living in their in-laws' cramped basement. I only found out by accident. The bank called me, thinking I was his co-signer. I wasn't. Eric had just added me as an emergency contact, probably thinking nothing would ever go wrong. Or if it did, I'd handle it. Because I always did. That night, I called the bank, opened a secondary account, and quietly paid the debt. No lecture. No drama. No. You owe me. And now he was calling me at 6:30 in the morning like I was his personal IT help desk. I tapped the pause transfer button. Done. No more lifeline. Let's see how long it takes the golden child to realize who kept his kingdom standing. 3 hours later, he left another voicemail. His voice was 10 degrees more panicked. Dude! Jess is on me hard right now. I thought you had it on auto-pay. She says the last 8 payments were under your name? Is that true? Why wouldn't you tell me? I didn't reply. Because the answer was simple. I wanted to see how long he'd lie to himself. At 5:12 p.m. Mom called. Straight to voicemail. Hey sweetheart, your brother's a little upset. There's some mortgage issue? He said maybe it's something you set up that's now broken? Can you just call him and sort it out? There it was. Not, are you okay? Not, why were you paying his mortgage? Just, can you fix it again? I turned off my phone and went for a walk. No music. Just crisp evening air and the sound of someone else's world falling apart in my pocket. The next morning I checked my inbox. Subject, urgent, final notice before default. To Eric and Jessica. CC me. Bank didn't even wait. Eric was 3 days away from default. And for the first time, I wasn't the buffer between him and consequences. I was just a name on the email, the one who used to quietly solve everything. Then came the text. Jessica. Hi Adam. I just saw the email. I didn't know. I didn't know you were paying this whole time. He told me we were caught up. Why didn't you say anything? I stared at her message. And then came another. I'm really sorry. This shouldn't have been on you. There it was. Not a full apology. But it cracked the surface. Because suddenly, someone realized I'd been cleaning up a mess I didn't make, and I stopped mopping. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Let them sit in the silence they never noticed until I left it. Because for once, they were feeling the weight I'd carried quietly for years. I was on my second cup of coffee when the intercom buzzed. It never buzzes. Nobody shows up unannounced at my building, unless they're a delivery driver or a neighbor who locked themselves out. I checked the camera feed. Eric. Wearing his signature. I just came from a meeting. Outfit, button-up shirt, loosened tie, and the world's worst poker face. I considered not letting him in. But that would have been too easy. Instead, I buzzed the door and left it unlocked. He stormed in like he owned the place. Didn't even look around, just marched straight into my living room like this was a confrontation scene from a TV drama. I need answers, he snapped. No hi, I said, sipping my coffee. Not even a nice place? He looked around like it was the first time he realized I didn't live in a shoebox. Open floor plan. Polished concrete floors. Framed prints. Plants I actually kept alive. You've been paying my mortgage, he said flatly. I didn't deny it. For 8 months? He added. Yep. Why? I tilted my head. Would you have preferred foreclosure? He blinked. Sat down slowly. His confidence took a hit, like he'd walked in with a sword and just realized it was rubber. I didn't ask you to, he muttered. No, I said. But you listed me as an emergency contact. The bank called me when you skipped 2 payments. Jessica didn't know. Mom and Dad didn't know. And you didn't return my call. He shifted uncomfortably. I figured it was a one-time thing, he said weakly. You missed 3 more payments after that. He rubbed his face. I was waiting on a contract. The same contract you mentioned over dessert last weekend? Silence. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words got stuck somewhere between shame and delusion. Finally, he said, You made me look like a joke. I laughed. Out loud. I made you look like a joke? I repeated. Eric, you've been performing your one-man fantasy for months. The bank almost took your house, and you were out here posting beach photos with #GrindSeason. He stood up. You could have told me. I could have, I agreed. But you didn't ask. Not once. You just assumed someone would take care of it. That's not true. Really? I cut him off. Because even now, you're not apologizing. You're just mad I stopped. He opened his mouth again, then closed it. I leaned forward. Here's the truth, Eric. You've been living off the idea that I'm the lonely brother with no life. And while you were playing grown-up with leased cars and expired credit cards, I was covering your roof, your kids' safety, and your late-night online orders you pretended were for the business. His eyes widened. Oh yeah? I knew about the Amazon receipts. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder labeled Receipts, Mortgage. This is every payment I made. Every month. Every time you went out to dinner and posted about hard work paying off, I was the one literally paying. He didn't even look at the screen. He just sat down again. Slower this time. Quieter. I didn't mean for it to be like this. He mumbled. No, I said. You just didn't care how it was, as long as you weren't the one dealing with it. There was a long pause. The kind of silence that makes you realize someone has just met reality for the first time. Then he whispered, Did Mom and Dad know? I smiled, sipping my coffee again. Not yet. I didn't tell Mom and Dad. Didn't need to. By the next morning, Jessica had. How do I know? Because I woke up to 12 unread messages in the family group chat, a thread I usually muted unless there was a holiday or a birthday to fake celebrate. The preview alone was enough. Mom. Why would you go behind our backs like this? Dad. We could have figured this out as a family. Eric. Thanks a lot, Jess. I opened the thread like I was walking into a burning house with popcorn. Mom was in full meltdown mode. I don't understand, Adam. Why didn't you come to us if you knew Eric was struggling? Why handle it this way? Handle it what way? By not telling anyone that your precious golden child couldn't handle a mortgage? You made your brother feel humiliated. You should have talked to him instead of just cutting him off. That was rich. I paid for 8 months. Said nothing. And now I was the villain for no longer funding the circus? Dad chimed in next. Look, this isn't about blame. It's about family. We stick together. We lift each other up. We don't embarrass each other like this. Oh, but Eric mocking me in front of everyone at dinner? That didn't qualify. Suddenly, I was the one bringing shame to the family because I pulled my money, not my mouth. I was still reading when the call came in. Dad. I picked up this time. Adam. He said sternly, skipping hello. I'm disappointed. Great to hear your voice too, Dad. This isn't how family handles things. You could have come to us. You should have warned us. I leaned back in my chair. Warned you about what? That I was bailing your son out behind the scenes while you were busy toasting his success at dinner? Silence. You made him look small, Dad said finally. No, I said calmly. He did that. I just stopped editing the story for him. Another silence. Then, you know, not everything has to be a performance. I actually laughed. That's rich, coming from the man who gave Eric a new car when he graduated and told me not everyone's college material when I got my HVAC license. You're still bitter about that, he snapped. No, I said. I'm just not pretending anymore. You made it clear who mattered. I just finally took the hint. He tried to backpedal. We never said you didn't matter. No, I said. You just showed me. Repeatedly. There was a long pause. You could almost hear the gears trying to shift in his head. You know we've always supported you in our own way, he said softer now. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Yeah. I know. That's why Eric thought I'd just keep paying his bills without asking. Because that's how this family works, right? I fix, he shines. Adam. I gotta go. Someone's at my door. That was a lie. But I needed space, and he wasn't earning another second of my peace. I hung up before he could reply. And for the first time, the silence on my phone felt like relief instead of guilt. Later that night I got a text. From an unknown number. Hey man. It's Jess's brother, Mark. Just wanted to say, what you did. That was solid. Most people would have let it all burn. You tried. They just never saw it. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Because it wasn't just validation. It was recognition, from someone who didn't owe me anything. Someone outside the bubble finally saw what they'd all missed. And I realized, maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I was just done pretending the silence was okay. It started with a drip. Not metaphorically. An actual drip, in my parents' kitchen. On a Thursday night around 9:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Hey sweetie, sorry to bother, we've got a small leak under the sink. Think you could come take a look this weekend? It's probably nothing. No emoji. Which meant she was worried. And trying not to sound like it. I stared at the message. 3 weeks ago, I was invisible at the dinner table. Now I was their emergency contact too. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another ping. Your dad tried to fix it, but I think he made it worse. Water's all over the cabinet now. You always had a knack for this stuff. The compliments always came laced with need. I set my phone down and went back to folding laundry. At 10:17 p.m., she sent a third message. Can we please just talk? That one stayed unread. The next day, I got a voicemail from Dad. Look, if you don't want to come, fine. But we're calling a plumber and sending you the bill if it turns out you rigged something last time you were here. There it was. When guilt didn't work, they reached for blame. I hadn't touched the pipes in months. Last time I offered, Dad said, we're not your clients. Now they were asking for a technician on call, for free. Saturday afternoon, I got a photo in the family group chat. It was their kitchen floor, soaked. Towels everywhere. Caption: we're calling someone since Adam's clearly too busy. Underneath it, a message from Eric. Guess we know who really sticks around. That one made me laugh out loud. The man whose entire home would have been repossessed if I hadn't quietly covered his mortgage for almost a year, now pretending like he was the dependable one. I didn't respond. Instead, I screenshotted the chat and archived it. Then I booked a massage. I had the whole afternoon off, and for once, I wasn't using it to crawl under a sink for people who only remembered me when things got wet and inconvenient. Sunday evening, another voicemail. This one from Mom. Her voice was tired. I'm not asking for much, Adam. We just need someone we can count on. You used to be that person. I don't know what happened. I almost replied. Almost. But then I remembered all the Thanksgivings where I fixed their dryer while Eric made a toast about hard work. All the birthdays where my gifts were practical, and his were thoughtful. All the family dinners where I sat at the edge of the table like furniture with a pulse. I hadn't changed. They just noticed who I was after I stopped playing the part. That night, I opened a box from my storage closet. Inside was my old HVAC jacket, the first uniform I ever wore. Oil stains, ripped pocket, faded name patch. I folded it neatly. Tossed it in a bag with some tools I no longer used. And the next morning, I dropped it off at a local trade school that ran a program for youth aging out of foster care. The guy at the front desk looked surprised. This is great gear, he said, pulling out a cordless drill. Some of these kids show up with nothing but a beat-up wrench. I nodded and smiled, even though something clenched in my chest. Because I remembered what that felt like. I left the bag. Didn't leave my name. Didn't need to. Because I realized something that day. I used to give out of guilt. Out of habit. Out of some desperate hope that maybe my family would see me. Now, if I were going to give, it'd be to people who saw value in what I did. Not just in what I gave them for free. It was my dad's birthday dinner. Mom made her famous overcooked pot roast, and everyone acted like it was a Michelin star event. Eric brought a bottle of wine he couldn't pronounce. Jessica smiled politely like she always did when she didn't want to be there. And me? I sat at the far end of the table again, like some distant cousin they forgot to uninvite. We were mid-meal when Eric leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine like he was auditioning for a finance bro commercial. Then he said it, loud enough to make sure no one missed it. Still alone, huh? No wife, no kids, no life? He chuckled. Mom actually laughed too. Dad smiled behind his glass. Like it was a joke everyone was in on but me. I didn't flinch. Didn't crack. I just set my fork down slowly, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and looked up. Calm. Steady. Measured. No income either, Eric. The room went quiet. That's why you've been living off me. And that's when it landed. Eric's smirk vanished. Dad blinked. Mom tilted her head confused. So I clarified, just loud enough for everyone to hear. 8 months. I paid his mortgage for 8 months. Quietly. Because the bank was about to take the house and he didn't tell you. Or Jessica. Jessica's head snapped toward Eric. Her jaw tightened. And last week, when the payment didn't go through? That wasn't a glitch. I just finally stopped. Eric looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. Mom opened her mouth, but no words came. You mocked me for not having a family, I said, voice low. But I was the one keeping yours from falling apart. You just didn't know because you never asked. The pot roast suddenly didn't smell so great. I stood up, tucked in my chair, and looked around the table one last time. I'm not angry, I said. Just done. With fixing things that none of you ever admitted were broken. Then I left. No slamming doors. No shouting. Just gone. That was the last family dinner I attended. A few months later, I hosted a get-together with friends at my place. People who'd helped me build things, who laughed with me, not at me. People who didn't care whether I showed up with a partner or alone, as long as I showed up as myself. I didn't check the family group chat that night. But I heard from a cousin later that Mom tried to toast my brother again. Something about persistence. Only this time, it didn't land. Even Jessica didn't raise her glass. Because now, they all knew who really held everything up. And who finally put it down.